Hey Quilties, Karen Marchetti here. This time on Dual Process, Jody Robinson and I are working on Tumbling Blocks, super fun quilt. So anyway, grab your printable and let's get started. Hey guys, it's Karen. For my simple version, we're gonna just work on loopies, I guess you'd say. So let me see if I can zoom in on this. Whoops, a little too much. There we go. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start here, and I'm gonna first go this way, then come back up the up and downs, and I'll show you as I go. Super easy, and it doesn't matter which way you do the loopies. So I'm just doing a big one and a small one. Small one, big one, small one, small one, big one, small one. And this is like a half a row, so I'm just kind of squeezing them in there. You'll see as we go along how it fits into the bigger diamonds. And I'm gonna maybe assume that I can fit this much in one pass. So from here where we stopped, small loop, big loop, small loop. So you see I did my small loops going down. It doesn't matter. This one you can do them going up, whichever feels more comfortable for you. So this one, small loop goes up, big loop goes down. Either way, just as long as you do a small, big, small. And that just travels right across super fast. So now we're here again. And now we'll fill in this diamond row. Just kind of hesitate into that point right there so that you don't mess up. And in the half ones, of course, you'd only do the small one and a big one. So then I'm going to stitch down the edge of my seam, come back this one. And if you wanted to do them like this, you could as well, just do like springs. You can do that too, whichever you prefer. I just like how it looks with the loops. A loop is my standard go-to. So that's where my comfort zone is, but everybody's different, so you have to find out which one works for you. Okay, from now I would stitch down here. I would roll the quilt, and hopefully I can finish this section in the last pass. If not, you would just roll again. Okay, so my needle was here. I rolled down. So again, I'm just going to start. Big loop, little, big, little, big, little. And I just continue that across. So now we're going this way. So a small loop, big loop, small loop. And it's really continuous. As long as you don't run out of bobbin thread, you could actually stitch the whole quilt with one start and stop. So again, we're just filling that in. Now from here, go across here. And again, a partial one. Stitch down the seam line for this diagonal here. And you see how fast this fills, and it quilts the same way. It's a super fast option, super easy. Stitch down here, and we'll do that last little partial row. And there we go. So let me zoom out. And there is the finished quilt. Like I said, super easy, fill space, really quick. So I guess I should show you this one in a full pass. Oh, that worked out good. So then you would just do like E's and L's to fill the whole space, if you wanted to try something like that. Stitch down to here. And of course these stitch much better than they draw. It gets a little crazy looking when you're drawing it. And it does take a little bit longer than just the 3 loops because you're making several more loops, which I guess is pretty self-explanatory. The more you're stitching, the longer it's going to take you. But that would be another option if you wanted to fill it like that. I think the loops is perfect. It actually makes it a really, really cute baby quilt. Okay, so I'll see you back here in a couple minutes.
Hi everyone, it's Jody. For my simple quilt design for our Tumbling Blocks quilt, I'm going to go with something kind of nice and fast for one. And it's going to allow a design that's going to allow us to move from the left side of the quilt all the way to the right and then kind of work our way back and forth that way to make it easier to complete the quilt. And I'm going to pick a really nice, fun, fairly open, free motion plan, and we're going to use 2 different designs. So what we're going to do, looking at this quilt, let me just show you real quick. So the areas that we're going to do are, we're going to treat these as a row, and then we'll treat these diamonds as a row, and then this same kind of the block part of it as another row. And we're just going to fill those areas, and we're going to use 2 different designs. So in these, let me show you what they are before we get started. In these diamonds, as we go across the entire quilt, what we're going to do is this kind of spiky, nice open. You really can't mess that one up. And it allows us to move really easily right into the next one. And then on this alternating row, what we're going to do is just by eye. Of course, if you're someone who really needs to have things evenly spaced, you are welcome to maybe grab a marking tool. I'm going to put 3 different units of a design in each of these blocks, meaning 1, 2, 3. And what it is it's kind of like a paisley, but what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and do like, it's kind of an arch. And then we're going to paisley it out like 1, 2, 3, do another one, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And we'll just do that the whole way across. Notice that I'm making them fit the area that we have height-wise. So those are the 2 designs. They're both very forgiving. And again, if you want them to all be the same size, that is perfectly fine. But it really, I think that in the end, if they're all a little bit shaped different, it really is not going to make too much of a difference. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to assume, pretend, I guess, that we can reach this much of this quilt in one pass. Of course, not knowing exactly the size of the squares and the blocks. I don't know that, but for quilting purposes, we're just going to assume we can reach those. And then, of course, once we get to this row, we'll have to advance the quilt. So to get started, what I'm going to do, again, with this kind of open, I'm not going to worry about any stitch in the ditch right at this moment. What I want to do is go ahead and do these little spikies, and because they're only going to be half, because these are little areas, I'm just going to work my way across, staying within those little diamonds as my area. These just kind of curve but spike. Now, when I get over to this side, I am going to stitch in the ditch. And the reason I'm choosing to do that is that it's going to allow me to travel. So I'll stitch in the ditch here, and that, of course, would be neater in real life. But it's going to get me back to this side. And for me personally, I like to work from left to right. It generally just seems to flow better for me. I don't get confused in which way the design is going. So at this point, I can just drop right down here and start doing this one. And remember, we're going to do by eye. We're just going to divide this in 3, bounce back, next one, And we just continue doing this as we go across. Now, when I come to the one that's going to land on a seam, I will want to make sure that one of them kind of at least stitches on that seam, just so we don't have these seams popping up at the end of the quilt. We'll just repeat this as we go. It goes real nice and quick. Got that one a little bit too big. I'm sure you can guess what you're gonna do when we get over here to the end. We are going to use that seam again to travel back to the left side. So let's get these last couple in here. And again, I will use the seam to travel back. And now we're ready to do this next section with the little spikes. So this time we have the full diamond. Just going to go from one side to the other, and as we come to the next one, we can just scoot right into that next one. And just keep going. Get over to this side. And again, I'll stitch in the ditch. And we're coming, I think, about, well, no, we can do a couple more. Again, I'll just drop down and again repeat this kind of paisley shape. I'm not even too concerned. I mean, by eye, you're going to be able to do these little bounce backs fairly even. If they're not, that's really, it's not a big problem. I don't think you're going to really notice it in the end. Just keep doing that as we go. And maybe you want a more open quilting than even this. You may choose to put only 2 of these in each block. And that would work just as well. It's just going to be a little more open. Again, making sure that on one of these I grab that seam just to make sure it's not like popping up in the end. One more time. We will stitch in the ditch back to the beginning. And then we're going to pick up with those little jagged peaks. Over to the other side. So at this point, I will go ahead and stitch that in the ditch too, so I can get back to the other side. So I know that that's done. And I'm going to go ahead at this point and tie off, because now we can advance the quilt, because we'll be able to reach the second half of this. So I would go ahead and advance that. And now I know that I'll be able to reach the rest of the quilt. And I'm just going to repeat what we've already done, because we've already stitched that in the ditch. We can just pick right up with our quilting. And so that means we're back to the arches. I'm just going to repeat exactly what I did for the top half. So we are on this last little half diamond portion, the same as we had at the top. So these are just going to be a little more shallow. And that is complete. So I hope you guys have enjoyed seeing a nice, easy, very flowing design that will allow you to kind of, depending on how many echoes you want to put or how many of these arches you put in each piece, it allows you to determine the density of your quilting. So I will see you back with my more complex design.
Hey guys, it's Karen again. This time we're working on the more complex version, and very similar to my last version with the loops. This one is, as long as you're using one color thread, it is also continuous. So what we're going to do is we're going to start in this top corner, and we're just going to stitch back forth. Okay, not super dense, not super loose. Just back and forth in this direction. So we're following this seam line right here. Now in this next section right here, we're going to quilt super densely because that's the shadow. I mean, if this is your tumbling block, right? There's your block. This is the light spot, this is the mid spot, and this is the darkest spot because this is where the shadow is on the box. It's that optical illusion. And if they've used the correct fabrics, it'll show like that. If not, then you can create a little more depth with the quilting. So again, on this one, we're going to quilt it much denser, and we're going to follow this line. So we're going to go real dense, like that. Super dense, and then up to there. So on this next one, the mid one, we're going to do between this density and this density. So like a middle density, and we're going to follow this line. And it's harder to see in pen, of course, than in quilting. So from here, we'll then go to this super dense one. And by density, I just mean the spacing between the stitches. The rows of stitches. So now we'll do the middle density. And the super tight density. And you just alternate these as you go through the block. And now the mid density. And again, one more of that super tight density. And I'll end here. And then I'll come back again following this line with the least density. So we'll just come in. Oops, I kind of messed that up, didn't I? And fill this in. And that's why you really want this density and this density to be slightly different. So if you think this is the least density, middle density, and most density, to keep that shading of the blocks. Okay, let me erase this. So I'll come back one more row from here. Now remember, this is, if you think 1, 2, 3, we're on 2. Another thing that you have to pay attention to when you're stitching a tumbling block, because your brain from here, you're like, oh, I got to do the super tight density, and you'll mess yourself up. So we want to do, the mid density here. Oops, and I'm following the wrong line. That's the other thing you have to pay attention to, which line you're following. So I'm following this line with a middle density, and I want to end here so that I can go into the next block with that super tight density. So real, just up and down, but real close together. And if you want to use a ruler for this, you sure can. It goes really fast without it, But if you're not comfortable in stitching those lines right up next to each other, feel free to use a ruler. So now again, the middle density. And here, you have to pay attention to which corner you're ending on. And then up, do that tiny density. And if by chance you end on the wrong corner, just, stitch up along that seam line, you'll be fine. And then super tight again. See, like this, I just went up that seam line. And then the middle density. And then we'll stitch down and we'll go that way. So I'll continue this and then I'll bring you back in when I'm done drawing it all in. Okay, so we finished that. So again, remember the main thing is the direction of your lines and the density of your lines, because there's your tumbling block. And you can do different directions than I did. If you want to start this one like this way, and then this one again that way, and then this one this way, you can, but you see what happens like that? You want to make sure that each side of the block is kind of going in a different direction, because like this one, if you do them all the same direction, even with a different density, it'll kind of blend together a little. So you want to make sure, so let me see if I can change color. There we go. We'll use green. So this one is following this line. This one is following this line. And this one is following this line. So just keep that in mind as you're planning out which direction you're going and which densities you're using. So I hope you enjoyed it.
Hi, it's Jody again. I'm back with my complex design for our Tumbling Blocks quilt. And if you think back to the simpler version, we're going to do kind of the same thing. We're going to use the same areas, so we're going to treat the same thing. These as one area, which will all have the same design. And again, we're going to choose to do all of these diamonds like a row with a different design. We're going to alternate between the two. So the reason I would say it's more complex, we do need to mark just a little bit. And on an actual quilt, I would grab a template, in this case, probably a stitching ruler that was a nice shallow curve, because what I want to mark is this. And I'm just going to go ahead and see how you could use a nice curved ruler for that. And I am going to go ahead and leave this on here so you can see as we work through the quilt how that works. And then down here, we're just going to turn that and do it the other direction. These aren't going to be the most even with me just freehand marking them, but you get the idea. So kind of like a nice shallow arch in each one. Okay, and so what we're going to do is go ahead and put a nice flowy, and I decided that I want to use swirls because I like a nice swirl fill. It's easy, it goes pretty quick, it provides a lot of movement because it twists and curls in. So I decided that for my design along these marked spines, I'm going to use swirls as well. You could certainly change this up very easily. Maybe you are a feather person and you love to stitch feathers, you could put feathers here. I just feel like the swirls are very forgiving. If you're not quite to the point where you're good with feathers yet, the swirls are a really nice alternative. It's kind of the same look, but everyone can be different. So it's unlike a feather where you kind of need them to look like a feather. You could also put leaves on here if you love to do leaves, because they're also very easy to do. So we're going to start the same way. Let me show you real quick. So what we're going to do is travel along this spine. I am not going to stitch the spine. It's there. By traveling along it to stitch these swirls, we're essentially going to create the spine as we go. So what I'm going to do is come along here and just randomly place these swirls. Now you'll notice on this one I just drew, and then on this next one, I was kind of trying to be sure to get at least part of a swirl over top of that seam, because if you were to avoid it all the time like this, it would, when you're done, these seams might pop forward a little bit and be distracting. So I just always try to make a point to kind of have at least a swirl or two go over top of that to push it down nicely and evenly. So let's get started. We're going to do those swirls in there, and then in these open areas we're going to do just a smaller swirl. So I would start over here, and it's just a little swirl, and you can echo back and put some more swirls until it's filled. And then we're just going to travel here, do the same thing. It's very nice, goes pretty quick, nice and flowing. And these ones are only half, so they're going to go pretty fast. Again, I would probably stitch these in the ditch, and it is going to allow me to do it as I come back to this other side. And now I can drop down and start with my first row of flowing swirls. So we're just going to travel where we've marked that spine. And you can see how easy it would be to replace the swirl with a feather or leaf. I'm just going to go along here, getting all the swirls. And you can see how, because we're traveling on that chalked line or marked line, that it's creating the spine. We didn't even need to stitch that. Goes nice and fast, very forgiving. And then again, when I get to this side, I would travel down here and go ahead, stitch in the ditch to get back to the other side. And then we'll do this next row, same. This time it's a bigger area because we have the full diamond. And you just swirl around until you have it all full. Have an area you can echo back, and then right into this next one. And continue going. This last section. And you could use another fill if you wanted to. Again, we'll ditch So we can get back to the beginning. Drop down. Oh, I did the other ones on my drawing the opposite direction. Well, I guess we can come down here and we'll just go ahead and ditch here. Since I totally forgot what I did. But now that's fine. Because now that whole area is ditched and I can just come up here. So what I mean that I screwed up was I went every other one, I alternated direction. So this row is going that way. This row is going to go back this way. And I like to do that mostly because I feel like it gives you a lot more movement. So it's like it flows over to here and then it flows back. So now that we're in the right place, I totally forgot. We're just going to do the same thing in the opposite direction. Work our way back. And so I'll have to remember, maybe I'll forget again. You know how that goes. And it's fine. There's always a way to make it work. I think sometimes we're a little too hard on ourselves when it comes to that. Keep going. Again, I want to make sure that at least part of my swirl touches that seam so I don't have an unquilted seam that seems to be almost like a little eyesore because you notice it so much if they're popping forward like that. Come down. And because I have now already done the top, I can go ahead and just start right into my swirls here. I love swirls because you really can't mess them up. And if you need to move around within them, you can just echo and no one really can tell. It's always a bonus. Last one. So now that we're at this other side, I am going to go ahead and ditch because remember that the first row of swirls went to the right, the second to the left. So this next one I want again going to the right. So we'll go ahead and ditch to get back over here. And then I'm just going to complete these last 3 sections exactly the same way. Coming up on finishing this last section of fill, and that brings us to the end. So I think that's another fun, pretty easy to do design. Gives a lot of flexibility. You could change out the fill to be whatever your favorite fill is. And again, I mean, I like the swirls. Maybe you like feathers or leaves or any number of other designs that you'd like to put in there. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Thanks so much for joining us. We hope that you have enjoyed today's designs, and be sure to join us for the next episode of Dual Process.